what I wanted to do is open our conversation with one quick acknowledgement of the incredible, fortunate possibility to have a rare conversation, to assemble 3 university and college presidents on a stage to talk to us about their work, their experiences, their view of the future of higher education. And I just want to say one quick thing, that this, in a sense, in light of what Michael was talking about earlier, this represents all of us, represent the best of what universities do. The ability to assemble different people, different kinds of people, people from different walks of life, people with different occupations, people from different disciplines together, no matter how much public speaking they do, no matter how much news they watch or they're in the news. We don't ever have a chance just to sit around and talk for an hour or an hour and a half. That's a rare commodity. So thank you for your time, but also the opportunity to hear people from different levels or different kinds of universities and colleges. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. So we have a diversity of institutions that are being represented. We have a diversity also, and I think this is important as well in terms of what is unique about the university. We have people from different disciplinary backgrounds, people who are trained in different fields. And so your assignment, I'm gonna act like they're not there. Your assignment is actually to think about that and to listen to how we, along the lines of what Michael said earlier, how do we process the world and then explain it back to the world as from our positions in higher education, from our training in higher education. And so again, I think that's another sort of exciting issue or exciting possibility that really the university and the college provides that really very few other institutions do. The ability to just talk across boundaries, to talk across experiences. And that really lies at the heart of what a university is. Now, one more comment. As we were driving up, Michael told me a story about, in this very room, of a person moderating a conversation, doing introductions that went on so long that he got booed. And I think he did that on purpose. So you're going to watch me now take my 2 pages of introductions and move them to the back. We know who's up on stage. It's in your programs. But so let me turn quickly then to the first question so we can have a conversation. By way of introduction, I actually wanted to ask each of the people up on stage to tell us about their campus, to tell us about their job, to tell us about their students, their faculty, the kinds of education that their students get there. Or sort of thinking the way Michael framed it, why are your students at that college? And so I was going to give everybody a few minutes actually to just talk about that, and then I'll ask a follow-up question. So why don't we just go in order? Michelle.
Great, thank you everyone. A lot of you are here because you know a lot about Claremont Graduate University already, but I think that there's a lot that being a first-gen student in my family to go to college, there's a lot of misunderstanding in my conversations with my dad and mom about what actually goes on here at Claremont Graduate University. And so one of the ways I love to talk with him about the university is that it's like a small, wonderful city community. And by that I mean we have everything from campus security to the students, the faculty, the staff, the administration, the board members, the community, and everything in between. So everybody's experience at Claremont Graduate University on a daily basis is totally different. And that's what's so exciting about it. And I know Josh and I share an admiration for James Blaisdell, and he said something along the lines of the center of a college is in great conversation. And I like to think about every day at CGU, that's what we have. We have amazing conversations happening. We have students in small classrooms, in seminars, having conversations with their faculty. We have large statistics classes where they're working together on stats problems and trying to figure out what a p-value is. We have research happening, and it is often not easy to see research happening, right? And this happens in small labs, it happens in faculty offices, it happens at Hegelbarger's over coffee. So we're seeing and feeling and having those conversations about research. And then the other thing that I tell my dad a lot about is administration, because I think that a lot of people don't understand how much work goes in to making sure that our students and faculty and staff have a good experience, and that we are doing the work that I talked about earlier, which is that every student has that individual experience and an opportunity to find their passion, but that they're also connecting with a community, that we have clear standards about what learning is and how they've demonstrated learning and how we assess that and how we then can share with the world that at the end of the day when they are graduates, they're not only transformed, but they have a degree that means something to the world. So I picture a day in the life at CGU of all of these conversations with our faculty, our staff, our students, our alumni, and we're so fortunate here in Claremont to have the consortium. So we also then have the opportunity to have undergraduate students from the other colleges walking in and taking some of our classes. I have the rare opportunity, from Michael's comment, to be able to meet weekly with my other 6 college presidents to tackle a lot of the issues that are happening out in the world. So in closing, I would say a day at CGU is conversations. It's across all members of the community and all of these different roles, and each stakeholder plays a unique role. And I always say that if we're doing our jobs correctly, some of the best learnings and debates and conversations are happening on the way to class, outside of class, in a research lab, in a seminar, or between faculty and among faculty and student peer groups. So it's a great place, and it's different every single day, and you can feel the vibes. You can feel on Tuesday afternoons that's the busiest time for classes. Friday afternoons are a little quieter. There's more maybe reflection happening and writing. So it's a really dynamic, unique, and as I said earlier, a blend of open plaza and conversation and really quiet places and reflective gardens and spaces where people can take time to deeply think and write. So that's what I would say about a day at Claremont Graduate University.
Wonderful. Thank you. It brings back a lot of memories from when I attended here at Claremont for my PhD in education. I started in 2001, and I received a PhD in education with an emphasis in urban leadership. So I recall those days. Now I'm the president of Fullerton College, and I am a proud president of a college with 20,000 students. We were established in 1913. And, you know, a little bit about my college, around 35% of my students are the first in their family to attend college. Around 80% of our students receive federal financial aid. And I'm proud to say that around 60% of our students identify as Latino, Latina, or Latinx. And we have around 13% Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander students. We also have around 1,000 African American students, and 14% of our students identify as white. So we have a very diverse student body. And I'm proud that community colleges provide the access that's needed to break not only generational poverty, but also to ensure that our students understand who they are and where they come from so that they can be the critical thinkers and learners that we need in our society today. You know, it is something I bring with me to my presidency as I engage with my community members, from faculty to students, classified professionals, administrators, community stakeholders. I bring with me that my own mother was able to attend Mount San Jacinto Community College, a single mom of 4 daughters, who got her start at the local JC to earn her high school diploma, and then pursued her associate degree, and later transferred to Cal State San Bernardino, where I was a counselor at the time, and earned her bachelor's degree in her 50s. And she is now an admissions counselor at that same institution. You know, my sister lives here in Claremont. Her and her husband bought a home, and it was just around a few years ago. I helped her write her letter of appeal to some sellers in Laverne, California. And it was during this time that we learned that my grandmother attended a segregated Mexican school in Laverne called Palomares School. So I bring all of this lived experience with me to help my students, my faculty understand our obligation to explore the systemic racism that existed then and what it may look like now, so that we can continue to disrupt and change our society into what is needed so that we become better hosts, you know, a better community and society for our students. That's what I love about community college. I will say that just yesterday, I was at Cosumnes River College in Sacramento, California, with a fellow CGU alumni from our PhD program. Dr. Ed Bush is the president there. Thank you. And I was there with a team of my faculty, administrators, and staff, and we were learning about what Dr. Bush has done at his college, where 88% of his courses offer open educational resources to their students. The life-changing experience that brings is phenomenal. He's able to help students to lift the burden of the cost of textbooks. And to me, that is a practice that we want to emulate at Fullerton College. You know, I just recently had a data briefing about our students and their basic needs information. And 18% of my students experience housing insecurity. And you know, we also learned that around 40% of our students experience food insecurity. And that to me is heartbreaking, but I know that what we can do as practitioners in education is to continue our own learning and changing the institution so that it better serves the students who are there today. And I'm just really, really proud to serve in California community colleges. And I'll close by saying that my day in the life of being a president also includes connecting with other presidents and administrators across the state. I helped to found an organization called Colegas. That means colleague in Spanish. And we are proud to be 7 years old. We bring together practitioners across community colleges to share best practices and to encourage one another, especially in this environment that is so discouraging. You know, just down the street from my college, there have been 3 ICE raids. I have around 1,000 undocumented students, but I have a larger number of students who go home to people who are from mixed statuses. So it's a reality that we're facing every single day. Every day it looks different, but I still provide hope to my institution. I think it's important to draw from the research to inform our practice, and I started this academic year asking my faculty and administrators to read a research article by Andrade, and it's about hope and the importance of maintaining hope in times of despair. So thank you very much for your attention.
So Wesleyan is a small, old university. It's 3,200 students, roughly, mostly undergraduates, a few hundred graduate students in PhD programs in the sciences and in ethnomusicology, which we claim to have invented. I'm not sure that's true, but don't tell anyone I expressed any doubt about that. At Wesleyan, our students have no requirements except to finish 32 credits, 4 classes a semester. They, as a result, I think, wind up creating interesting or cockamamie, depending on your point of view, combinations of things across a wide variety of fields. It's a very expensive school, and about 40-some-odd% of our students are on financial aid, and probably roughly half of them don't pay any tuition. But those who pay a lot. So there is this kind of cultural, social experiment that goes on campus. Everyone has to live on campus. And so, in the United States that's extraordinarily segregated by class and race and ethnicity, on campus, you have somebody whose maybe grandfather's name is on the building, having as a roommate someone who has never set foot on a college campus before. I went there as a undergraduate myself, and like my fellow panelists here, first generation student, although that I actually joke with I couldn't have been because the category didn't exist when I went to school, so I couldn't have been first generation because there was no such thing, and they quibbled with me about this. But I got to Wesleyan, I met people who had gone to Exeter and Andover and Choate, and I had never met anyone who had gone to a private school who hadn't been kicked out of the public school. So I meet these guys, and I think they must be some tough guys. They all had gotten expelled from the public school, and that was not the case, of course. So I'll show you what I have to do at Wesleyan. My job at Wesleyan is pretty simple. I'll show you what I have to do. This is what kind of thing that I get paid for. I'm going to do it right now, because I have a message from my team at Wesleyan which says, take a selfie with the crowd. Wave, would you wave? So there's a lot of communication.
Somebody's eyes were closed, Mike.
I teach every semester. I teach a course now on virtue and vice in history, literature, and philosophy, and it's kind of a great books course, as you could tell from my previous remarks. And then I teach 2 other classes, and rotate them in and out, that I started teaching in Claremont. One is the Past on Film, which is a film studies and philosophy class, and the other is called the Modern and the Postmodern, which I started teaching at Scripps. My first class at Scripps had 3 people in it. At Scripps, said, teach what you want, and I was teaching a course called Freud and Revolution, which was the topic of my senior thesis at Wesleyan. And I had one student from Scripps, one of the few black students at the time, Crystal Jones, who remains a great friend, and she became a trustee at Scripps, and I got to see her a few weeks ago. And then 2 graduate students from Claremont, graduate school, as we called it then. And so I started that connection with the graduate and undergraduate education quite early, and quite maladroitly, I think. In my case, I didn't really know what I was doing. I see my work at Wesleyan as to encourage experimentation. And there are some kinds of experimentation that get out of hand and get dangerous, but curricular and intellectual experimentation is sometimes in short supply in the academy. And one of the things I loved about being in Claremont is that the weird configuration of schools and the graduate school being here in the mix, it created that opportunity for experimentation. And our students, when they're supported at Wesleyan, get a chance to experiment. And the gospel there at the school is that once they get better at what they love to do, they should really work at figuring out how to translate what they love to do and have gotten good at, so that someone will hire them to do something like that or something akin to it. And so we are very conscious of the fact that our students need to get jobs when they graduate, and we really want to set them up for success. We believe in pragmatic liberal education. I wrote a book called Why Liberal Education Matters, and it's called Beyond the University, and it matters because you're able to do something with it. And I think our students, they do extraordinary things, from the sciences to famously, Broadway shows and Hollywood films. So it's like getting on a rodeo bronco or something sometimes, but it's great fun, and the students and faculty make it possible for people to do things they never thought they would be able to do, and then to do them at a very high level.
Well, that's great, and thank you for those answers. I will admit, I intended to have that be a little bit of a setup. 3 presidents are going to say nice things about your institutions and your students, et cetera. And then I thought, we're having a conversation about the future of higher education, which if you Google it always switches to crisis in higher education, which had me then thinking about, like probably almost everyone in this room, I get a daily update from the Chronicle of Higher Education. So I went over the past month's emails, and I eliminated anything that had to do with the current administration, the current White House, as part of a crisis. And so I just selected the ones that weren't about that. So, will AI really rot students' brains? These are you remember these, right? These are the ones that came in on the Chronicle. Blank University in the Midwest turns the screws on students. Free tuition for 6-figure families. Should colleges worry about souring employment data? 2 demotions and a firing in 24 hours. A most disturbing student death. And then proving to me that somebody in the world has a great sense of irony. Today's headline was, the toll on the college president. So thank you, whoever that was. So now what's your daily life like? In other words, let's talk a little bit about what you experience. The kinds of conversations that you're having with parents or other students, or people who might not be as able to experiment. And the way I wanted to frame that question is, you have a lot of conversations with a lot of people. What are the greatest misconceptions about the university, about the college, about the experience that you're experiencing, not just within the university, within higher education, but also from people relatively outside it?
I guess I get to go first. So great question, and yes, reading the Chronicle these days, it takes a tough skin, and there's a lot of challenges, and you heard me earlier talking about the way I see it is higher ed is on fire right now, and there are a lot of daily challenges. And to some of the questions earlier, I do think some of those are self-inflicted, that I think the academy and higher education has maybe lost its way a little bit, and this is an important opportunity for us to refine our path. And so I think some of the biggest I think some of the biggest misconceptions that I deal with, and a lot of our conversations in faculty meetings and with students, I'm fortunate not to have to deal with quite as many parents probably as Michael does, but that one is, and particularly in graduate education, that you're just getting an education for a job, and that there is a 1-to-1 correlation between your degree program and your job title, and that if we cannot demonstrate that as a graduate university, that we are somehow failing. And I think that is an important misconception that we need to work to do better to address. To give you my own example, I have degrees in anthropology and management, and my career path took nothing that I had planned it to. And I work with a lot of graduate students who tell me the same thing. And so I think what we need to do a better job of in higher ed is demonstrating that the kinds of things we're teaching in all of our degree programs, critical thinking, communication, leadership, management, questioning, dialogue, building trust with people that don't agree with you, how to deal with someone that offends you, how to deal with someone that questions either your religious beliefs or your political beliefs or your fundamental question that a student asked earlier, why is that important? All of those are skills that we teach across our degree programs, and there's a lot of pressure on us to show that these skills directly lead to measurable employment in a very objective, data-oriented world. And I don't think that that has to be an either or. I think that's a both and. Yes, we train these skills. Yes, universities do an amazing job of doing that. And yes, those lead to good jobs. And yes, that's going to become more and more important as the jobs that we're training students for today don't exist yet. And by the time they graduate, may have morphed 1, 2, or 3 times. So as we deal with this uncertainty, the changing world, the kinds of work we do is critical, but the misconception, the questions I had to ask, why are you going to get a liberal arts degree? Why are you going on to higher education? What kind of job, Michelle, are you ever gonna get with that? I think those are misconceptions, or maybe we just need to do a better job of translating out into the world the unique stories of all of the 26,000 alums we have just at Claremont Graduate University, and we're one of 5,000 institutions just in the US alone. We don't do a good enough job, I think, of translating what we do in the classroom, and arguably it's hard to see what we do in the classroom, right? When you look out, you can't necessarily see learning happening. You can't see people developing critical reasoning or analytic skills. You can see PowerPoints and Canvas shells and student ratings of their learning outcomes, but we need to do a better job of illustrating that education is what matters, and people will find career paths as those paths evolve in the future over time. And so I think a couple of the things that the misconceptions are self-inflicted, but the other thing I think that we're starting to do, and I'm really excited about here at CGU, is more and more real transdisciplinary thinking and work, research, teaching, scholarship, and discussion that goes beyond our disciplinary silos, because I agree with what Michael Quinn Patton has been arguing. We need to de-differentiate if we're going to be able to speak out into the world around the critical, wicked problems that our students are facing and our faculty and students are facing together. So I think another misconception I deal with is that transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary is a big word that doesn't really have any relevance in the real world, when in fact that's all it is taking the scholarship and the learning that's happening at the university and translating that out into the community where it matters.
You know, I will say for my college, I just recently helped to shepherd through innovation, and we passed our first bachelor's degree in drones and autonomous systems. And so I think it's very important for us as educators to consider what are the future jobs that exist, what are the future career sectors that are out there, and to help nurture our faculty members to find those programs and to bring them to fruition so that our students have access to these jobs that are going to be here in the future. So I'm really excited about that potential. I will say that, I have 420 tenured faculty, and I just hired 14 additional this past academic year. So it's important for me to ensure that I'm bringing practitioners in who understand who our students are and where they come from. And I think that will help us with the criticism that higher education receives, that perhaps that what we're doing in the classroom is out of touch with what is needed in everyday living. I think bringing faculty members in who understand that it's their job to be mentors, to be the facilitators of learning, and not simply to be the experts of a discipline or content knowledge. I think that our students know, and society in general knows, that they can access information on their own. So I think it's important for us to continue to have educators who empower students, who build on the strengths our students bring. I spent around 15 years at Pasadena City College, as a dean, associate VP, and VP there. And one of the theories I brought there was the work of Dr. Terrayoso, community cultural wealth theory. You know, it's very important for people to understand who our students are and that they bring strengths with them. You know, being multilingual, for example. So if we see our students and their strengths and we build upon those strengths in our classrooms and our programs, then we're contributing to society in a way I think that it breaks the traditional viewpoint that people have where you come to education to be filled with new knowledge. We're building on the knowledge our students already have, and we're tapping into the power they already have. What I'm doing at Fullerton is I've brought in a researcher by the name of Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, and she's an expert on Hispanic serving institutions, and she has a theory called servingness. And what she posits, and this is especially important for the 116 California community colleges we have in our state, 80% of our community colleges are Hispanic serving institutions. She asks that we distinguish Hispanic enrolling from truly serving. And in that distinction, she calls for us to make sure we are encouraging students to pursue graduate studies in the community college sector, and that we are empowering our students with knowledge about their cultural and ethnic identity so that they have the responsibility then to disrupt the inequalities that exist today. So we've been engaged in this work with Gina Garcia for the past 2 years, and it's been incredible. The transformation that I see at my college, it's really moving the needle. We have a 6% student enrollment increase, and we also have increased our student completion rates. But more importantly, I'm making sure faculty understand that it's our responsibility to be those educators who are guides on the side rather than the sage on the stage. Thank you.
So my situation is different in many respects. And I'm so appreciative of the work that you do at the community college sector and around the country does, but especially here in California where it's so vital. Both my sons went to community college in California, and it was really a perfect way for them to begin a learning journey, really, that has continued. And so I just think this is such vital work, and you should all realize how fragile the support for that work has become, right? Not from the community where these opportunities are highly valued, but the support from the federal government plus the immigration assault over the last several months will profoundly affect the ability of community colleges to do the good work they're doing. I mean, I know you've talked about the strengths of it, and I think it's so important to defend those institutions from the intimidation and fear that the administration is cultivating. At Wesleyan, the misconception is, I guess, that liberal arts kids don't get good jobs, and I even asked the staff in this whole. We have a whole staff meeting at the beginning of the semester. I said, "What do you think the employment rate is 8 months after graduation, 6 months after graduation?" And they're like 25%, 30% in fields related to what they studied, and it was closer to 90%. And they don't believe me because they've heard me talk before, but. That was a joke. Somebody should have a hold of a thing. But it's true. They find ways of doing meaningful work, and I think it's really important. And the other misconception, I think, just because I think it really is a misconception. It's surprising that what we're doing. We've been offering. Free online or in hybrid classes in Title I high schools around the country for college credit for the last few years. It's part of an experiment, a failed experiment on my part. I thought we would by now have an online liberal arts degree that would make lots of money for Wesleyan and educate many, many thousands of students. It hasn't worked out. The numbers don't work for the way we want to teach. However, we are giving courses for free in Title I high schools around the country, and they range from calculus to psychology to the modern, the postmodern, since I had to volunteer myself to start this thing going, and economics and history. We're starting a civics course that through the National Educational Equity Foundation. They're doing the Lord's work. They've raised some money. They're doing this, and what it does is it shows students in high poverty high schools that they could take a course at a highly selected liberal arts college or university, Stanford, Barnard, Wesleyan, Harvard. They get a credit, which is great, but they also find out, hey, if I go to that school, it's free, actually. Which it blows them away because they hear it's $100,000 to go, but not for you, actually. And you got a B+ in this course, whatever. And so we're introducing a civics course that we will give in high schools next semester. And now my new dream of this is that we will be giving a civics course around the country for Title I high schools for college credit. And that will be a contribution to the public good. It'll give people free college credit, and they'll learn about voting, they'll learn about power, they'll learn about democracy, they'll learn about American history. I think that's not usually how folks think of a small liberal arts school like Wesleyan.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the three of you just wended together a couple different questions that I had or I was thinking about. That are a little convoluted and up in the clouds. So let me see if I can drag them down and make them less convoluted. There's a great line in one of the great histories of the American universities, written in '65, that says that you can measure a society's values by seeing what the majors are in colleges. And noting then that in the 1870s and 1880s, the grand lament was that too many, and it's gendered, too many men were going straight into business. What did they need a bachelor's degree for? And now, of course, we look at the primary majors not to offend any of the deans of the business schools in the room, but now the primary majors are business or finance. I remember touring Wesleyan with my son, and the questions were about the interesting interdisciplinary majors that one could create, and the parents all asked, well, can they major in finance or business?
And the answer is no.
That's what I said. So it's a complicated question about, obviously what society's value changes over time. What is knowledge? I mean, to your point, Cynthia, that universities are still set up on a model of knowledge production and research and teaching that's 150 years old. And you've described in some ways methods of unpacking that and then also thinking about technology as this sense that that's the great savior for offering a new kind of restructuring of knowledge production, a restructuring or a new way of delivering information or creating a more co-curated educational system. I'm sort of curious about that, like your stances on that this is the divide, especially for a person like me who's in the humanities, who worries about having to explain that we do matter. I'm not pointing at you, but I'm pointing at you. We do matter. So it's still a convoluted, airy question, but I'm just curious about that. Do we need to have a fundamental shift in our understanding of what is education and the knowledge systems, or is it technology going to save us, or?
I think I worry about technology and leaving my students out. I want to make sure. I know there is a great debate on AI, for example, and I have 42 senators on our academic senate, and shared governance is in the California community colleges. There's an assembly bill that clearly outlines what I'm supposed to follow. Assembly Bill 1725 for any scholars out there who want to research that. And so I must pay attention to what my academic senators have voted on about AI, but I feel a responsibility to ensure that my students, my very diverse student body, does not get left out of AI because I have a faculty that might be hesitating. So I see it as an access issue. And then also, there's a responsibility that we have to pay attention to the interests of people in general. And I know in discussing with my close colleague Ed Bush, he brought to our attention that there were students who were on TikTok and they saw this African American professor who was teaching African American studies and opened up her first course with her syllabus explaining it on TikTok. And she drew in hundreds and thousands of viewers, so that now there's a TikTok university and it's all Africana studies for free. And now they've created, she and her colleagues, who all got together via TikTok to create a free online education on Africana studies. So talk about co-creating knowledge and education. I think our students are telling us, or people are telling us, they go and share knowledge and they want to learn in an affirming environment. And that affirming environment, these amazing individuals found on TikTok. So I think it's important for us to understand that we also have to pay attention to those cues that help us see what other opportunities there are to create that sense of belongingness in higher education, in our own classrooms, because I love the in-person learning experience. But I think some of our members of society do really value the convenience and maybe something else that online education brings. Maybe it's like less bias because they're not facing in-person criticism that may be present otherwise. So those are some of my thoughts. Yeah, it is a lot of what I think about, especially somebody who I think I'm a futurist. I'm trying to always see what's coming so that I can prepare my college and for my students to have the best access to opportunities.
Well, I think the in-person, on-campus experience is going to remain attractive to some people, and I hope for a long time, although it's hard to know for sure. Some of you probably saw the article in the New York Times recently about that Harvard allows people to register for 2 classes at the same time because they don't expect people to go to class. I thought that was quite extraordinary. I didn't find it extraordinary that people didn't go to classes at Harvard. I mean, you got in, what else do you need to do? But the fact that the university would actually just allow this because you could get stuff online. I record all my classes and I post the recording on a bulletin board for students, and I also require them to attend class. And although my class fulfills no requirements at the university except you can get a general credit for it. So I feel like, and this is part of my Wesleyan experience as a student myself, is that I feel like the people choosing their course, choosing their course of study and what they want to do leads to very different learning outcomes than when they're doing something because they think they have to. The biggest major at Wesleyan is economics and sometimes psychology, 2 fields that have been incapable of making successful predictions for a long time. So I think that's why they're, and so they have that in common. But we have people at Wesleyan who want to do a college of business and society. And when it was first proposed to me, I thought, business at a liberal arts school? No. And then I thought, these are really smart people. They know that many of our students sign up for economics. They don't really want to do economics. They just need some economics because they're interested in commerce, they're interested in business, they're interested in organizations. And so as I typically am, I'm supportive when the faculty and students want to try a new combination of things, even when it's really out of my ken. And so I think the desire for face-to-face learning, I mean, it is very intense. I saw this during COVID. We opened pretty early for face-to-face education, and students were extraordinarily hungry for those classes, and that remains true. At the same time, I'm trying to understand how technology can be my friend in this endeavor. So in my class this semester, I'm not giving take-home exams for the first time since 1984. I have them writing in class, but I also require them to use AI to discuss the material in the class with a bot we've created. It's not very hard, apparently, which asks them really good questions, the kind of aggressive, semi-ironic questions that I would ask them had I time to meet with them each individually. It's a big class for us. And that primes them for a discussion at the end of the week where they have in small groups with just students and a facilitator. And as it turns out, they really like this. This gives them some priming for a very positive discussion. So I've been trying to get my colleagues at Wesleyan, faculty colleagues, many of whom are really afraid of AI, and not for understandable reasons, to think about how to use these new technologies to advance liberal learning. And you know, my last editorial comment will be that about this will be you know, that many people have said, and especially this professor at Princeton, Graham Burnett, have said that the age of immersive reading is over. You know, it lasted a few hundred years, but it's over, and people will, that's why you have podcasts, and you have other things that people will use for aesthetic or informational purposes. I think that's overstating it. I think it's clearly becoming more of a minority activity. That is, small groups of people like to do it. And so I want, like you should do at a university, is find ways to provide people who are studying unpopular things with vehicles for in-depth learning of unpopular things. We are very bad at universities at predicting what jobs are coming in the future. I can't tell you how many people 8 years ago had told me I should require coding, which would be silly now, right? It's just silly. But the jobs that people are being hired for require judgment. They require certainly AI literacy, but they require discernment. They require teamwork. They require the kinds of things that you do learn in a liberal arts environment. And as we've said, we don't know what those jobs will be in the future, but if they need human skills, these are human skills that won't be replaceable by automation.
I would just add, I think, you know, I said earlier that I think graduate education is a place, it's also a community, and it's a journey of educational discovery. And I think that technology can and does augment our ability to give more people access to that place, connection to that community, and different ways to tap in and out of their educational journeys. And I think that many of our faculty and staff and students at CGU have leaned into various technologies, including AI, not all, but it's another tool that we can think about using in the right ways for the right questions to help students find their passion and perhaps answer a question in a different way. So I look at it as a tool that in graduate education particularly, we have an opportunity to help our students explore, but it's one of many tools that we have, and a lot of different tools in their toolkit that we try to challenge and expose them to. And I would also say to the major issue, I think it's important that we do have historians who remind us that these these disciplines and these majors come and go again, and they can be cyclical, and that it's important that we're not too short-sighted and too business-oriented to start closing or canceling or stopping offering certain kinds of inquiry because at the moment it is not in favor or it's not at the top of the cycle. And I think computer science is the most recent example of that, but there are many that we could probably look to throughout history. So as educators, I think it's important to remember what I said earlier is that we think in centuries, and in centuries, yes, business of some kind is always going to be important. Technology of some kind is always going to be important, but can we continue to offer areas where students and faculty can continue to explore those topics and not get too caught up in the fashion and fad of the day, which today is AI, and who knows what it will be tomorrow.
Great. Okay, I'm going to ask the most dangerous question now, and it's the final question. And I'm taking discussant's privilege by asking it, because we'll then turn it over to questions and answers, or questions from the audience. And it's the simplest question, that's why it's the hardest. You get the genie in the lamp. He or she gives you one wish. What are you going to do? What are you going to wish for your job, or for the university, or for that future/fantasy of higher education? What's your wish? Sorry, that's a tough one. I'd hate that question, but I'm asking it.
I can answer. I have two really quick. I think one fantasy I have is that we figure out in higher education how to stop being so focused on our success as who we exclude rather than who we include, and how we can get beyond rankings and selectivity as the preeminent measure of a quality education. So that's one. The other one would be that we find, nurture, and hire faculty that come from a broader and more diverse pipeline. There was a 2022 study in Nature where they cite the fact that 1 in 8 university professors in the US were trained at 5 of the elite institutions in the US. So we can't really see innovation, diversity, and new ways of approaching education if we continue to have, and I have the quote the author said, extreme inequality in faculty production. So my dream is that we would expand that pipeline out to have different types of faculty that we're bringing into our institutions to push and challenge and converse with our students.
I just want to point out, Michelle did the smart thing. She wished for 2 wishes rather than more.
I should have gone for
more. Yeah, should have gone for more.
You know, I think my wish would be that my students would be relieved of the burden of, finances, and that community college would truly be free. Right now it is, for most students, the registration fees are free, but the cost of books, the cost of their time. You know, many of my students work and also go to college full time. One trend that I do see is that students are so smart. They are enrolling in their general education courses online and then choosing to enroll in their major courses in person, as they recognize that they want to develop those relationships with people who are in the profession and the fields that they are interested in pursuing. So I want to honor my students by making sure we relieve them of the financial burden that they carry with them as they try and make their dreams come true. And then the second wish I would have would be that in higher education we figure out how to do the storytelling that's necessary to convince the general public to believe in us again.
So my local wish, they wish for at my institution, very much like yours, which would be that we would not have to care about how much tuition our students pay. And that would require us to have a much larger endowment. And so I spend a lot of my time when I'm not teaching and just talking out loud, trying to raise money so that we can fully support all the students who want to study at the school. And that's an ever-increasing challenge because of the expense of running a school where you have small classes and great faculty and facilities that support learning. So it's so the fantasy / my job is to raise lots more money so that no one who can't afford to go to the school who we accept will not be able to go. They should all be able to go. And yeah, world peace, I guess, otherwise.
And here I thought that was the tough question. You were all ready for it. Well, it's time now to turn it over to you and give you a chance to speak. So honestly, the first hand that went up is yours, yep, right there.
I've also seen Dr. Perkins' hand up for a while. Hi.
Hi. I'm an alum, and I'm teaching at Cal Poly Pomona, and one of the activities I had them do is each present to one another, who are you and what inspires you. So I've learned from each one of you who you are, what inspires you, and thank you, Cynthia, for the storytelling. I really wanted to hear that from everyone. I appreciate, the web pages of successes and student population. What I don't see a lot of in schools is the storytelling, so I appreciate CGU starting that with the Centennial. Share more stories of success. So who inspires all of you, whether it's student, faculty, or community?
I'm inspired by students, and I would say at Pasadena City College, because I was there for such a long time, I really made sure I knew at least 10 students very closely so that I knew their stories. And to me, it was a window into the meta experience of 30,000 students. As president, it's harder for me to do that. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm only 2 years and 6 months into my role. But the student stories I would learn about were just phenomenal. It changed my daily practice as an educator. And one story in particular is a young man who came to us from downtown Los Angeles. And he would take the Gold Line because he wanted to leave his neighborhood, because in his neighborhood was his local gang. And if he were to remain in the community college closest to his home, he would probably get into fights or have to defend himself. So he would come to Pasadena City College, and he was in an honors program. And Homeboy Industries saw that he was doing well in school and raised funds for him to participate in our study abroad program. And so he was in study abroad, and he just had the time of his life, and he came back and he said thank you to all of the donors by sending his report card from his study abroad experience with straight A's, And I just loved knowing that he was having life-changing experiences that built upon his strengths, because he was really, really bright. And I encouraged him to be commencement speaker, and he would have to try out. And he was very afraid to do it, but he tried out, and he was our commencement speaker. And he shared how his journey from, being in juvenile hall and traveling every day on the Gold Line, and then traveling around the world to study abroad, it really was transformational for him. He finished at UC Berkeley, and he also is earning his master's degree, and he's back now working in the field of helping other students who are also formerly incarcerated and system impacted. And that's all through community college.
I'm inspired by our faculty and our staff. I think one of the things that people outside of higher education don't necessarily understand is how hard they work, how much burden faculty and staff have taken on in the wake of the pandemic, moving to different modalities, supporting students everywhere on the globe. It's a lot to take on, and our faculty and staff are also taking on a lot of the inspirational stories of students like that, which is helping them when they have financial challenges and emotional challenges and everything in between. And it's a great group of people that work in higher ed, and they are inspiring every day.
This will give me a chance to say, I have to say these words every 4 hours. Lin-Manuel Miranda. I have to say those words. He's clearly inspiring. But the other alum who really was, I knew as a student, Lin, I didn't know when he was a student, but got to know within the Heights, as a man named Kennedy Odede, who came to us from Kibera, and a large slum in Africa where he met a Wesleyan kid who was doing study abroad. It's another story. They are now married. But they met in there, and he was trying to escape some political violence, and he applied to Wesleyan and matriculated. We were able to find a scholarship for him, and when he gave the commencement address when he graduated, and he said his first day at Wesleyan, he ran from his dorm across the field to the dining hall, and he got there, the doors were locked, and he was like waiting, and somebody said, "Hey, what are you running for, man?" And it's Wesleyan, we talk that way, and he said, "I want to get here before the food runs out." And the kid said to Kennedy, "This is Wesleyan, the food never runs out." And he said, "That's the first lesson I had," he said, "about being here, is that you don't realize how the resources you have that are always replenished." He went on to found an organization called Shining Hope for Humanity, which provides education for girls in Kibera, and now in many schools all over Africa. When he was still a student, he did this. He got a bunch of Wesleyan students to get inspired and volunteer, and then he got donors. And he came to see me in my office, my very grand office, and he said they were starting a health clinic at the same time as they started a school. And I said, in my privileged white guy presidential role, I said, it's a lot. You're starting a school, it's probably fine. You don't need a health clinic. It's a lot to do from Middletown, Connecticut, and across. And he said, "Excuse me, we've already started it." So we have the money. The mothers who are dropping off their daughters, 80% of them are HIV positive. We can get them the medication. They thought it all through. So I sat back in my chair and said, "So what can I do? Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, if I was in Africa, I'd ask a big man for a blessing." And he looked at me with a certain amount of suspicion and said, "You're the closest thing I could find." And I think we all started crying, and I gave some combination of a Jewish and African blessing, and we're great friends, and he does the Lord's work all over the world now, and that is really an inspiration.
I'm sorry to say one more question, so just looking at the time. So we're getting a request for Linda Perkins. Can you pass that down to?
Thank you so much. And this is a faculty question.
Wait for the.
Hi. This is a faculty question, not a student question. But I have former students who are now new professors, and they are really impacted by what's going on with the government and, all these words you can't use that have been circulating. And I had two students who were new faculty this year. One teaches at a small private school in Minnesota and a U.S. history class, and she said she was teaching a class on Native Americans, and this student raised her hand and said, as a Christian, I don't accept what you just said. I know that Christians would never treat Native Americans this way. And then a student of mine who teaches in California said the same thing. She said a student, but this was a gender studies class, and the student said, as a Christian, you know, and so I didn't know, is this a thing now? People just go around prefacing everything with, as a Christian, I reject what you say. So how do you advise people who are now in the academy? A lot of people saying, should I change my syllabus? And I'm afraid I'm going to get fired just by teaching my discipline.
It's heartbreaking to hear that. I'm really saddened to hear that our new faculty are experiencing this. I will say it's different at community college. We've not faced the scrutiny yet of the federal government. Hopefully we escape it, I'm not sure. I would say that I would probably utilize real life examples. I know for example, a colleague of mine at Cal Poly Pomona, Sandy Dixon. You know, Dr. Dixon herself was placed in Native American boarding school, taken from her parents, and placed into a home with a white family. She herself experienced this. So I would encourage faculty members to learn real life examples so that if there are individuals who are rejecting notions of historical fact, that we use real life examples of people who are in the academy now who share about their experiences. So that way it's irrefutable, right? And yeah, that's what I would have to say from community college.
I find this a fascinating, it's a frightening example, because actually these students have learned this from progressive students over the last 15, 20 years, when it was very common in a classroom or in a faculty meeting or in an administrative meeting for someone to say, as a black person, I feel, and that's like throwing a card on the table, or as a first generation student, or as so that identity move rhetorically. These now conservative or perhaps conservative students, they learned it from the identity politics of the last 20 years, which is a way of saying, you shouldn't ask me about this because you don't because you don't share my identity, or those of you who do share my identity, you have an inside knowledge. And so I find it, how does one deal with that? And I think you could back off and say, well, since you're a Christian, I can't talk to you. Or since, let's say if I said as a Jew and you're not a Jew, and they say, well, or you can say, so as a Christian, what about this history can't you accept? Or, in other words, one has to not allow the declaration of identity to make one immune from either conversation, facts, or argument. But it has been that in the academy, mostly from the left over the last 25 years. And so now it's coming to us, they learned those lessons. Chris Rufo, he read his Gramsci. He is coming to us from the right. And I think there's a way of respectfully acknowledging the identity, but not letting that isolate someone from a conversation about historical argument or truth, I think. But it is frightening when you're in a state as a new faculty member and you're afraid that this actually may get reported. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I just would say, as Michael talked about, I fundamentally believe that the critical role of the university is to push students and scholars to question, debate, and critique. So as a whatever that someone starts the comment with, I think the right response is the question to follow up and to have that debate. And I think we have to continue to do that despite the fact it's getting harder and it's challenged more and more.
Well, my apologies for not being able to offer you the chance to ask more questions, but this is our opportunity to thank the three of you for this incredible conversation. So it's now my job to tell you to go to lunch. There are ushers and people with CGU shirts all around who will escort all of us on the way to the lunch that is awaiting all of us. Thank you again. Thank you for coming. Thank you for spending the morning with us, and keep the conversation going.